have a family history of hereditary mental illness, but I will conceal it. During the 3 years of senior high school, apart from a few students who transferred schools, no one was aware of my true situation. Unexpectedly, when reporting for freshman year in university, I encountered bullying. They not only threw my luggage around, seized my dormitory room, but also threw away my medications. What they threw away wasn't just my sedatives. It was their own antidote for regret. I have a family history of hereditary mental illness. However, the treatment was timely. As long as I take my medications on time and manage my emotions well on a daily basis, I basically won't have an episode. Due to my well-adjusted mental state, I even performed a section of Tai Chi at the university's grand welcoming party for freshmen. Unexpectedly, when I returned to the dormitory that night, I found that paint had been spilled on my quilt, and my daily necessities had been thrown into the trash can. I stared coldly at this scene, and my originally cheerful mood suddenly turned gloomy. Is this the little vixen who stole the show at the party? Your face looks so unpleasant. A mocking voice came from outside the dormitory. Then, I saw a young girl with long hair cascading down her shoulders, accompanied by 2 little lackeys, strutting in with a look of triumph on her face. She glanced at my bed, seemingly quite satisfied with her handiwork. Oh dear, how did the quilt get splashed with paint? How are you going to cover yourself with it at night? The lackey behind her giggled and stepped forward. While lifting the quilt, he laughed and said, "Then don't cover yourself with the quilt." As soon as the words were out, the dead mouse hidden in the quilt was suddenly exposed before everyone's eyes. She pretended to cover her mouth and took a step back. Oh my, how could there be a dead mouse hidden in the quilt? The other 2 lackeys stared at my face and burst into wild laughter. Seeing that I remained expressionless all the time, one of them became somewhat annoyed and stepped forward to shove me. "You little vixen, what's with that deadpan look?" Another person reached out and slapped my face. "Don't think that just because you're good-looking, you can do whatever you want." The irritability that I had forcefully suppressed was finally stirred up again by the provocation of these 2 idiots. "You're the ones who spilled the paint and placed the dead mouse here. I'm afraid of hitting the wrong person, so I always make sure to ask clearly before taking action." The leading girl unexpectedly kicked me. Ji Yen became even more arrogant than before. "So what if it was me? What can you do about it?" After saying that, she raised her foot to kick me again while cursing. "Consider this a lesson for you today. If you dare to steal the limelight again in the future, watch out for your face." I looked coldly at her audacious appearance, and thought that if I endured any longer, I would be betraying my family's history of mental illness. Before she could finish speaking, I grabbed her raised foot and gave it a hard tug. Then, she sat on the ground with her legs spread apart in a straight line, and a scream echoed throughout the entire dormitory. I didn't give her a chance to recover. I stood up and stomped hard on the inner part of her thigh, and the screams grew even louder. I scratched my ear and walked towards another lackey. In his shocked and furious gaze, I grabbed his hair and slammed his head against the doorframe with all my might. One blow after another, blood spilled all over the floor, and the bright red color was rather striking. I licked the blood on my fingertips and walked step by step towards the trembling girl. "Have you ever tasted the flavor of blood?" My voice was extremely calm. She stared back at me with her neck stuck out. Although her face was deathly pale with fear, she was still stubbornly shouting, "You little slut, do you know who my father is? If you dare to lay a hand on me, believe it or not, my father will kill you." Ha ha ha. I laughed so hard that tears welled up in my eyes. I pinched her cheeks and asked seriously, "How exactly will he do that?" She was taken aback at first, and then she started flailing at my arms like a madwoman, trying to break free from my grasp, while mumbling incoherently, "You slut, you're just a slut." Finally, I had laughed enough. I grabbed her hair and threw her onto the bed where the paint was still wet. Amidst her angry and desperate struggles, I picked up the tail of the dead mouse and twirled it in front of her. "How could you have the heart to hurt such a cute little mouse? You're so heartless." My hand that was swaying the mouse suddenly stopped above her, and she was so scared that she covered her head and kept screaming. I have to admit that I was deeply pleased by these terrified screams. "Are you afraid of the dead mouse?" I asked kindly. Seeing that I didn't seem to be making any further moves, she said guiltily and viciously, "I know your name is Lin Jiaojiao, and you're a freshman. If you let me go today, we can call off our feud." I smiled faintly and casually swayed the dead mouse. In his increasingly loathing gaze, I gave a forceful tug, and the palm-sized dead mouse was instantly torn in two. I was quite satisfied with his terrified look. Then, I forcefully tore off a mouse leg about the size of a finger. "Have you ever eaten a mouse?" I asked him. Despair had already emerged in his eyes. "Lin Jiaojiao, I was wrong today. I apologize to you. Please don't." I admired his sense of the situation. However, I pried his mouth open with one hand and stuffed the mouse leg into his mouth with the other. In the end, it was the counselor who arrived at the scene with the police and took both me and the so-called big sister to the police station. The two little lackeys, due to their relatively serious injuries, were sent to the hospital by the counselor. The big sister somehow got in touch with her family on the phone. By the time we reached the police station, her father had already been waiting there with a group of people for a long time. She finally saw her backer and rushed into the man's arms like a madwoman, pointing at me and shouting non-stop, "Dad, that bitch actually fed me a dead mouse. You must kill her." I quickly hid behind the policeman and feigned fear. "Uncle policeman, I'm scared." The policeman gave me a look as if to say, "You're so dramatic," then glared at the big sister and scolded, "This is a police station. What killing nonsense are you spouting?" The big sister was still indignant and wanted to shout, but was firmly held down by a middle-aged man in a suit beside her. "Officer, I'm Baye's father. My daughter was beaten in the dormitory by a freshman and forced to eat a dead mouse. If you don't give me an explanation for this matter, we won't let it go today." The policeman looked at me with a complex expression, then motioned for the three of us to sit down in the interrogation room. After a detailed understanding, the policeman looked at both of us. First of all, this incident was initiated by classmate Baye. However, Lin Jiaojiao's actions were also too violent and bloody. Fortunately, no major incident occurred. Moreover, both of you are students. Our suggestion is to reach a private settlement. I leaned back leisurely in the chair, looking sideways at Baye, who was angrily shouting that she must beat me up, but was constantly being held back by her father. I found it extremely amusing. Lin Jiaojiao has just started her freshman year, and already started beating classmates. As far as I know, one of the classmates suffered a severe head injury, and the legs of another classmate also seemed to be injured. How can such a person still be allowed to stay in school? This poses a potential threat to the safety of other classmates. Baye rolled her eyes and stopped shouting about killing me. Instead, she forced me to drop out of school. Either you kneel down now and kowtow to me 3 times, and let me record it to beg for my forgiveness, or you pack your bags and drop out of school automatically. Otherwise, I'll have our family lawyer sue you until you're bankrupt. The policeman frowned, seemingly not in favor of the other party's approach, and knocked on the table to remind classmate Baye, all of classmate Lin Jiaojiao's actions stemmed from your initiative to start this. As a senior student, you took the lead in initiating campus violence, which is already wrong. Now you're being so overbearing. Isn't it a bit excessive? I suddenly brightened up when I saw the young policeman's eyes. This guy has quite a sense of justice, and can clearly distinguish right from wrong. The father got angry. "Officer, are you trying to show favoritism just because this little bitch is good looking? My daughter was clearly caring for the new junior stamay. How come it becomes bullying in your mouth?" I really couldn't bear to see the young policeman being wronged because of such people. So I sneered. "Splashing paint on my bed and hiding a dead mouse in the quilt is called caring for junior stamay? Since you put it that way, then me stuffing the dead mouse's body into your daughter's mouth is to reciprocate the senior sister's care and treat her to some game meat. What do you think?" The two of them were so angry at me that they were speechless. In the end, under the policeman's mediation, we signed a letter of understanding. Before leaving, the policeman said earnestly, "You are all schoolmates. You must be united and friendly." Baye was very dissatisfied with this result. She pulled her father and turned around to leave. I, on the other hand, shrugged indifferently and followed them out of the police station. At the crossroads, Baye's father blocked my way and said with a playful smile, "Little girl, I originally thought you were young and ignorant. If you had apologized obediently to my daughter, this matter would have been over. But you refused to take the easy way out. Then don't blame me for bullying a child like you." I rolled my eyes and pushed his stout body aside, striding away in his astonished and shocked gaze. I guessed that they would definitely try to take revenge, but I didn't expect their methods to be so low level. When I went hiking in the suburbs on the weekend, as soon as I came out of the public toilet, I felt a sharp pain in the back of my head and immediately lost consciousness. When I woke up, my hands and feet were tied, and a rag was stuffed in my mouth. I looked around and found that I was locked in a warehouse. Dim yellow light shone down from above. Baye was fiddling with a camera with several men. When they saw me wake up, lewd smiles appeared on the faces of several men. "You woke up pretty quickly." 2 of them rubbed their hands and walked towards me. "We'll keep you company and have some fun, and also shoot a video as a souvenir." I ignored them, and my gaze fell on Baye. She walked towards me with a vicious look on her face. "Unexpectedly, right? You also have a day to fall into my hands." I stared at her motionlessly, and my gaze followed her movement until she stood in front of me. Suddenly, she slapped me across the face. "Lin Jiaojiao, aren't you good at fighting? Aren't you ruthless? Fight back." Baye slapped me 2 more times, hitting me from both sides. I could already taste the fishy taste in my mouth. It seems that this feud is completely settled. She pointed at the camera not far away and laughed maliciously. "Aren't you good looking? Today, I'm going to make you really show your face. I'll have someone take some good videos of you and post them online. Maybe you'll really become an internet celebrity." As soon as she finished speaking, 2 men rubbed their hands and walked towards me. "The girl is really good looking. Today, we brothers are going to have a great time." After saying that, the 2 men grabbed my legs and dragged me in front of the camera. Then they were about to untie the rope on my legs. When Baye saw this, she immediately shouted, "Don't untie it. What if she runs away?" The man seemed to have heard the funniest joke. If the rope on her legs isn't untied, How can we brothers have a good time? As soon as Bai Yi heard this, she immediately understood. She coughed lightly and walked to the corner to play with her phone silently. The few men surrounded me. Some were tearing my clothes, and some were pulling my pants. Until the rope that tied my legs was completely untied. I did a quick flip and immediately clamped my legs around the man's neck. Then with a hard twist, his neck made a cracking sound. The other 3 men who were in the process of taking off their clothes grabbed the daggers at hand and rushed towards me desperately. No one expected that a seemingly delicate girl like me could still fight so well with my hands bound. Fortunately, the 3 men's movements were restricted by their half-off pants, which gave me an opportunity. I first picked up a dagger, and while running around the warehouse, kept cutting the rope on my wrists. They chased after me, holding up their pants and yelling. This situation changed after I ran 3 laps and completely cut the rope on my hands. I stopped and looked at the people running towards me, with an ambiguous smile on my lips. Since you're so eager to die, then come on. It's been a long time since I've had such a great fight. Since I had several conflicts with the senior sisters who bullied me in the first year of high school, I've really been quiet for far too long. At this moment, looking at the few men lying on the ground, some missing an ear, some with their eyeballs beaten out, with broken arms and one with a dislocated cervical spine, the long suppressed irritability and excitement in my heart revived instantly. I kicked the people on the ground. Get up. Stop pretending to be dead. No one gave any response. I had to turn my gaze to Bai Yi, who was shivering in the corner with a look of horror on her face. I beckoned to her. Come here. I won't hit you. She first shook her head. When she saw me narrow my eyes and look stern, she walked over tremblingly. I pointed to the dagger that had fallen to the ground. Pick it up and stab each of them with a knife. Bai Yi looked at me, as if I were a lunatic, and the people on the ground also looked at me in horror. But I seemed not to notice anything, and stood there with my arms crossed, looking at them. These losers. Bai Yi. These people were the ones you found to deal with me. Originally, I could have dealt with you together. But thinking that you and I are classmates, I was going to let you off. So I pointed to the people on the ground. You stab each of them with a knife to appease my anger, and I won't hurt you anymore. What do you think? If you can't bring yourself to do it to them, then I'll directly vent the remaining anger on you. As soon as Bai Yi heard me say this, she picked up the dagger without hesitation and walked towards them. I have to say this girl is a bit smart. She didn't stab them in the upper body, but stabbed each of their thighs with a knife. She completed my request without causing them fatal harm. Just after she stabbed the last person, I picked up one of their phones and called the police. Hello, is that the police? There are people here wielding knives and committing violence. In the interrogation room, I recounted the entire process of how I was kidnapped. Officer, combined with the evidence such as the camera, rope, and dagger collected at the scene, the police quickly confirmed my statement. However, they had a different opinion from me regarding the injuries of the several kidnappers. The policeman in charge of the interrogation walked up to me with a look of hesitation. You're a girl. How did you manage to be so ruthless to the 4 of them? Do you know that you almost killed them? I shook my head in feigned fear. I said they fought each other. Do you believe me, officer? The other party took a deep breath to adjust his emotions and said, fought each other? Can they stab each other with knives? I gave an ambiguous glance at Bai Yi, who was sitting with her head down beside me and smiled. Are you talking about armed violence? There are fingerprints on the daggers below. You can also interrogate those 4 kidnappers to see how they identify the situation. As soon as I finished speaking, Bai Yi, who had been silent all this time, looked at me in shock. Lin Jiaojiao, you actually set me up. I showed a bright smile. Bai Yi, first you hired people to kidnap me. When you failed to slander my innocence, you got angry that those kidnappers were a bunch of losers, and instead picked up a dagger and stabbed each of them with a knife. No, that's not true. Bai Yi looked at the policeman in a panic, but her guilty look had already betrayed her. Bai Yi, I'll just ask you, were the knife wounds on those people's thighs caused by you? Did you stab each of their thighs with a knife, after they were lying on the ground, without the ability to fight back? Bai Yi bit her lip and couldn't say a word. Her eyes were red with anger. When the policemen saw this, they understood everything. Even though there was my calculation in it, it was ultimately Bai Yi who wielded the knife and took action. In the end, Bai Yi was detained on charges of hiring people to kidnap and armed assault. Even though her father took the blame upon himself, he ultimately failed to bail her out. The incident of Bai Yi instigating kidnappers to abduct me created a great commotion in the school. Everyone looked at me with the Yang de Mugong. At first, I thought they were pitying me. It was not until I overheard their conversation in the restroom that I realized how naive I had been. It turned out that someone had spread a rumor that I had been electroshocked on my chest by the kidnappers, which was why I had angrily reported the case to the police. You're Lin Jiaojiao, right? No wonder you got into trouble. You do look quite alluring. A senior schoolmate whistled at me and spoke insolently. Good sister, how many people were there at that time? Was it quite enjoyable? Another person, holding a basketball, chimed in. I pretended to think for a moment, and then nodded, with a smile on my face. Whether it was enjoyable or not, you should ask yourselves. Then with a smile on my face too, one of them reached out his hand towards me. Good sister, you're quite open-minded. Are you planning to let your big brothers have some fun too? I snatched the basketball and smashed it hard into his face. The moment he fell to the ground, Ifeng Kongdi kicked his crotch. The senior schoolmates who were about to intervene subconsciously covered their crotches and didn't dare to meddle. After I finished a series of kicks, The guy who had been so mouthy earlier actually ran away. I was very unhappy. I grabbed the collar of the person at my feet and forcefully dragged him into the adjacent men's restroom. The boys who were urinating were so frightened that they immediately held it in. I pressed his head into the urinal, looked up at the boy who didn't have time to put on his pants, and shouted, "Piss on his face." The other person was so scared that he was trembling, and his urine was almost flowing out along with his tears. "Piss!" At my shout, the other person no longer cared and started urinating with his eyes closed. "Lin Jiao, are you even a girl? You actually. Stop peeing." I pinched his mouth to ensure that the precious liquid went into his mouth without any waste. How could such torture be enough? I grabbed his head and directly kicked open a cubicle where someone was defecating. After driving the man out, I looked at the boy under my hand, who was filled with fear. "Do you want to taste feces?" He looked at me in horror. "I'm wrong. I really know I'm wrong. I won't talk about you anymore." I grabbed his head and directly pressed it onto the feces. "You shouldn't speak ill of girls before understanding the truth of the matter. You shouldn't use such salacious events to humiliate women. Let me tell you, without your mother, you would just be a sperm in this life and never have the chance to be born as a human. If I hear you talking nonsense again, I'll cut off your manhood." I was summoned to the principal's office. As soon as I entered the room, I saw a middle-aged woman dressed in luxurious clothes sitting on the sofa. The moment she saw me appear, she immediately stood up and walked towards me. "So you're the one who bullied my daughter, Bai Yi. You little brat, you're not that old, but your methods are quite ruthless. How dare you frame my daughter for armed assault? She has just started college. If she gets a criminal record, how will she find a job in the future? How can you be so vicious?" Before she could raise her hand, I slapped her first. "If you can speak, don't bark like a dog. Who taught you manners and integrity?" I grabbed her hair with one hand and slapped her face with the other. "Why don't you ask what your daughter has done in the dormitory? Accusing others as soon as you show up. Is that okay? There are so many classmates, but why did I only deal with her? Don't talk to me about quality all the time. You don't deserve those 2 words. The principal, seeing that I had vented my anger almost completely, then hurriedly stepped forward to intervene. "You child, how can you be so rude to a parent?" I was taken aback. This principal is actually quite kind-hearted. "You little slut, how dare you hit me? Do you know who I am? My family is the richest in the city." Before she could finish speaking, the principal hurriedly covered her mouth and persuaded, "Let's focus on solving the problem now. Don't let the conflict escalate, okay?" The crazy woman glared at me viciously, and indeed became quiet. Only then did the principal look at me and say kindly, "Although Bai Yi bullied her classmates first, and then instigated people to kidnap you, after all, you are classmates. Can you reach a private settlement?" The crazy woman slapped the table. "What do you mean? What do you mean by my daughter bullying first and kidnapping later? She was just having fun with her classmates. How did it become bullying? How did it become kidnapping? Clearly, it's her who framed my daughter for armed assault." The more she spoke, the more insane she became. She pointed at the principal's nose and cursed. "You old shameless thing. Do you have other thoughts just because this little slut is good looking? Humph, she was with those kidnappers for so long. Who knows what happened in the middle? Shut up." The principal rarely got angry and glared at the crazy woman. No wonder Bai Yi started bullying classmates as soon as she started school, and would find someone to kidnap them whenever she was not satisfied. Turns out she has an incompetent mother like you as a role model. The old man was so angry that his bald spot seemed to split. I originally thought it would be best to settle this privately to avoid leaving a criminal record for Bai Yi. Now it seems. The old man snorted. "Lin Jiao, I won't interfere in this matter anymore. You make your own decision." I originally didn't want to settle it privately, but when the crazy woman saw that I was not easy to mess with, she started to apologize to me. She kowtowed to me and begged for my forgiveness, hoping that I would sign a letter of understanding to release her daughter. I was originally too lazy to pay attention to her, but after seeing her kneeling for 3 days, I was somewhat moved. The moment I signed the letter of understanding, the crazy woman laughed maniacally, pointed at my nose and started cursing. She seemed to have suddenly gone crazy after being suppressed for a long time, and launched a crazy verbal attack on me. It seemed that no words in the world could express the anger in her heart. The hatred in her eyes seemed to want to tear me apart. "You shameless little slut. You actually made me kneel to you for 3 days. Aren't you afraid of shortening your lifespan? Humph, you've signed the letter of understanding. I'll deal with you after I bring back Yi. Haha, interesting." Just as she was about to turn around and leave, I kindly reminded her, "Don't you even look at what's signed on the letter of understanding?" The old woman was confused. Seeing my smile, she finally panicked and took out that piece of paper. At the bottom of the signature, it said, "Call me Dad." Looking at her gradually distorted face, I sneered. "People as vicious as you, when you do something wrong, you want to force others to forgive you by means of moral kidnapping. How can you be so shameless? Do you think it's beneath you to kneel to me? Right? Have you ever thought that if it wasn't me who was kidnapped, but some other weak little girl, what would she have suffered that day? Do you know the camera that your daughter asked those kidnappers to set up? Mai Lanchonda 1T were like a machine gun, pushing her to the brink. You don't know. You know nothing. You only think about how to get your daughter out, but you've never sincerely apologized to me. Why do you think that just because you knelt for 3 days, I can forgive you? Dream on." I slammed the door shut, completely getting away from that disgusting thing. I slept soundly and woke up. I had already become the #1 on the hot search. The cause was a video link sent in the class group. I casually clicked on it and found that it was a video with over 30 million views and more than 5 million comments. On it were screenshots of the crazy woman kneeling and begging me for mercy, but being questioned by me. There was no content about her crazy humor towards me after she mistakenly thought she had obtained my signature, nor was there any content about her continuous questioning after she learned that she had been tricked by me. There were only the paragraphs where I unilaterally bullied her, and the scene where I forced her out of the dormitory. I really couldn't help but want to laugh. With such obvious editing marks, it still received the firm support of the vast majority of netizens. They cursed me in the comments one by one, accusing me of being so vicious at such a young age, forcing an elder to kneel. How shameless. Don't you have a mother? Don't you have an old age? No matter what the reason is, it's excessive to force the other party in this way. My God, there's actually bullying in college. It's so disgusting. The bully should die. Looking at those harsh comments, it was as if a knife had been stabbed in my heart. But I still pretended to be calm, and went to class, to the cafeteria, to the library, doing all the normal and ordinary things. But around me, there would always be a circle of people, intentionally or unintentionally. They would gather in groups of 3 or 4, pointing at me and talking about me. Some were arrogant and deliberately shouted loudly that I was mean. There were even some people who, without distinguishing right from wrong, spouted moralistic nonsense, threw my food on the ground, and secretly hid my books. I looked at those viciously cursing comments, and felt that all the blood in my body rushed to my head, and I instantly became extremely irritable. I originally wanted to treat people sincerely, but they treated me like this. I looked at the locked document bag in my suitcase, where the relevant documents about my hereditary mental illness, issued by the hospital, were placed. As a hereditary mental patient, I actually still wanted to reason with them. Thinking about reporting to the police, I was really too kind. Just as I put away my suitcase, and was about to take revenge, the counselor suddenly walked in. He looked at me with a worried but firm expression. Jiao Jiao, regarding the matter of the hot search, the school has reported it to the police. I was somewhat astonished. Bai Ye's mother did kneel, but it wasn't what the netizens saw. They didn't care about the truth, and just spread rumors wantonly. They will all bear legal responsibility. The school has reported it to the police, and requested the software to ban the video with relevant content from being spread again. This can also minimize the harm to you. My irritable mood eased a lot. Forcibly suppressing this matter might make those people think we're guilty. Only by proving our innocence can I completely free myself from this matter. In the following time, I repeatedly watched that video. Following the shooting angle of the video, I accurately found the classmate who had filmed it at that time. Under my intimidation and the counselor's admonition, the other party finally told the truth. This person had been bribed by the crazy woman before filming, and took the opportunity to film the video and post it online. Whether I had signed the letter of understanding at that time or not, this video would become evidence for them to take revenge on me. After I obtained this confession, I went to the police officer who had handled my kidnapping case. He was very willing to come forward to clarify some situations for me when necessary. And in the name of inquiry, I met Bai Yi, who was being held in the detention center, and incidentally lured her to talk about what she had done to me and secretly filmed it. So, after everything was ready, I gathered major newspaper reporters and popular self-media influencers, and held a press conference, which was also broadcast live in front of the vast number of netizens. In this live broadcast, I first recounted the whole story of the matter, and then proved my innocence and the crimes committed by the other party. Witnesses and various evidences appeared in turn, and public opinion quickly reversed. I looked at the netizens gradually pouring into the live broadcast room, and the words of concern or apology on the barrage, and I felt a bittersweet feeling in my heart. After presenting a series of evidences, I looked at the camera and said, with a rare good temper, the so-called justice doesn't come just by opening your mouth. What you think is upholding justice may actually be being used without your knowledge. When you can't determine whether what you see and hear is true, please keep silent. We hate and loathe bullying. It has destroyed many families and brought lifelong indelible harm and memories to too many people. In the face of the repentance of bullies, your simple "I'm sorry" cannot offset the impact and harm those things have on us. So I never thought of privately forgiving, and I will never agree to a private settlement. I only hope that more people who have been bullied can bravely stand up, face those who have hurt us, and make them get out of our world. At the end of the press conference, I held the counselor's hand and said firmly to the constantly flashing cameras, not everything can be redone, and not everyone deserves to be forgiven. The live broadcast had a good response. The netizens who had cursed me in the video came to apologize one after another and promised that they would never be easily led by public opinion again. Meanwhile, some people also shared their own experiences of being bullied in the comments. Although those things had happened a long time ago, they still couldn't help but tremble all over whenever they thought about them. There were also some who had once participated in bullying. They apologized for the mistakes they had made in the past in the comments, filled with remorse. Not long after this commotion passed, it was said that some schools had specially established anti-bullying working groups. There were dedicated teachers providing psychological counseling for both bullies and victims of bullying, hoping that they could all develop normal outlooks on life, values, and worldviews. I never expected that this matter would have such a great influence. It was somewhat beyond my expectations, yet it made me extremely delighted. I closed the computer and looked out of the window. Under the autumn scenery, classmates were wearing windbreakers, holding milk tea, and happily walking on the campus path. They were chatting and laughing in groups of 3 or 4. Just one glance was enough to feel their joy. As I watched, I suddenly realized that I hadn't taken my medicine for a long time. Looking at the medicine in the drawer, I thought perhaps I no longer needed to take it. How happy I was. Epilogue. I have a hereditary mental illness. However, perhaps because it has been passed down through too many generations, it is not so severe in my case. In the first few years, I only knew that I had this problem, but I had never had an episode. It was not until I was bullied in the first year of high school that I first experienced the irritability and pain during an episode. At school, I was clearly very well behaved. Just because I was good looking, I attracted the jealousy of some people, and I was often bullied by them in groups. They not only pulled my hair and tore my books, but sometimes when I went to the restroom during breaks, they would lock me inside until I was discovered and released by the cleaning aunt. I was both sad and angry in my heart. I went to the teacher several times to tell him about the unfairness and grievances I had suffered, crying bitterly as I did so. But he just impatiently told me to stay away from those people, to try not to be alone, and to attempt to make friends with them. Even when I missed a class because I was locked in the restroom, and the teacher knew the truth, he just told me to go to the restroom with a companion in the future. At that time, I was still young. Although I didn't think everything the teacher said was right, I didn't dare to refute at all. I always remembered what my mother said, and kept taking my medicine diligently. My silence and the teacher's inaction made those people bully me even more severely. They threw dead rats into my drawer, and put small flower snakes in my school bag, thinking that I would be scared out of my wits. It was not until I tore the dead rat into pieces, and threw them in their faces, and pinched the small flower snake to death, and hung it around one of their necks that they finally stopped. This respite didn't last long. On my way home from school one day, those girls joined forces with some hooligans outside the school and blocked my way home. They insulted me verbally, and claimed that they would make my photos public. I could hardly control my emotions. Even though I took sedatives in time, I was still so manic that I wanted to go crazy. It seemed that there was a devil living inside me, constantly inciting me to go crazy. As if out of control, I rushed towards each of them like a mad person. I bit their ears, punched out their eyeballs, and broke their arms. I didn't know where I got the strength to do all these things. It was not until I had vented all the anger in my heart that I calmly stepped on those people's bodies and left. Because of my family history of mental illness, even when the police found me, there was nothing they could do. Fortunately, those people knew that I couldn't be provoked. After being discharged from the hospital, they quickly transferred schools. There were also several timid girls who said they were so scared that they had a mental breakdown. How interesting. They were really bullying the weak and fearing the strong. With anticipation and restlessness, I entered the university campus. I thought I would start a new and wonderful life. To my annoyance, I encountered bullying again. This time, they still appeared in front of me in the form of a small gang. They spilled paint on my bed and put dead rats under my quilt. Just as I was frustrated that these people's methods hadn't improved at all, the leader of the bullying gang even tried to kidnap me. They not only wanted to ruin my reputation, but also record indecent videos to spread widely. I was somewhat puzzled. Why are there so many demons in this world? Clearly, I had done nothing. Yet they slandered and bullied me repeatedly. They knelt and kowtowed, claiming to seek my forgiveness, but then turned around and posted a video online, making me the victim, seem like the perpetrator of bullying, and making me experience the taste of being cyber-bullied. I was already prepared to take revenge at all costs. However, unexpectedly, this time, there were warm-hearted people standing firmly by my side, clarifying all the misunderstandings for me to the world. They protected me with their actions, making me feel the justice and warmth from the outside world for the first time. This time, I no longer suffered from the unfairness and perfunctoriness of others, but truly experienced the care from teachers and friends. As the autumn wind blew, I looked at the classmates on campus who were walking in a hurry yet with smiles on their faces, and an endless sense of joy welled up in my heart. How wonderful! I thought perhaps I could stop taking my medicine. The end.